Hello, welcome to J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Today we'll be doing some drawing with graphite. So get out your pencils, your cotton swab, kneaded eraser, and let's draw together. Remember, art makes life better. First of all, I'd like to thank you for being here today. Drawing days are my favorite days. They're just awesome. I always look forward to them. Today, of course, you're going to need your number 2 pencil. You need a 6B pencil, your kneaded eraser, and these are really funky erasers. They're very cool. You can pull them apart like that. Kneaded, K-N-E-A-D-E-D, it means that that's how you clean them. You can also shape those erasers. If you only need like a little spot erased, you can shape them down to a little point and just erase just a little bit, or you can use the whole thing and erase big areas. Your cotton swab, this is your blending tool. And I'm going to show you some different things to do with the cotton swab. So that's our reference. That's our scrap, our reference material. The first thing we're going to do, I want to teach you how to hold your pencil. I know that sounds kind of basic, but somebody's probably never taught you how to do this. When you're doing a layout and to draw very, very quickly, you want to hold your pencil a little differently. So instead of holding it like writing, this is what I call detail mode. This is what you do when you're detailing, because you can really grind it into the surface this way. Instead, we're going to draw like this. So you just put your pencil down, you pick it up like you're going to show it to somebody and say, oh, hey, look at my pencil. And that's how we're going to draw. We're going to actually draw with the side of our pencil like this. And your elbow and your shoulder make better arcs and circles than your wrist does. So we're going to draw with our whole arm. This gets your hand up off the paper. There's a variety of reasons that we draw this way. The first reason is it's faster. The second reason is you get better lines. The third reason is it never grinds it into your paper. I don't know if you've ever drawn before. You do a line and you go, oh, that's not right. So you erase it and you draw another one, but the line you first drew is always there. This way, it doesn't do that. You can draw all you want and it'll erase and no one will ever know it's there. I mean, it's very clean because it's superficial. It's on the surface. This will grind it into the surface and you'll never get rid of it. So when we're doing layout, we're drawing like this. Okay, it's very fast. You get better arches, better circles. So the first thing we want to do is we want to do our composition. We want to figure out where we're going to put this thing. And if you kind of look at our scrap, the head is clear up here at the top. You can even make a little mark up there if you want. Just say, I want the top of my head to be up in here somewhere. And I want the body somewhere towards the middle, to the lower part of the middle. So somewhere like down in there, I want the body. I'll try to draw this a little thicker, a little darker so you can see it. But that gives us a parameter. This is how big we want to make it. We want to make it the full size of the paper. And then you can say, well, that body is kind of this kind of teardroppy shape. The tail kind of goes over here. Back is over here somewhere. You can even come up and say, well, if this is the curve of the body and the neck's going to come up here like this somewhere, you can do like almost a little stick figure kind of a thing, just to figure out where that goes. Because all this graphite, we're going to get rid of a lot of it, but it's easy to get rid of when you've drawn on the surface like this. And you want to draw light. Sometimes I'll even go way to the back of my pencil and draw back here because it's a lot lighter. It's harder to grind it into the surface when you're way in the back like that. And you can say, well, okay, here's his head. It's kind of this oval. His neck is just going to kind of come down, has his little S curve. Kind of comes into the body right there. And then his beak's just this long triangular shape. And comes out like that. These are called simple shapes. And when you're drawing, you just start out with simple shapes. Circles, triangles, rectangles, that kind of a thing. His legs are so thin, we're just going to stick figure him. About from the center, I mean, if you kind of look at where his wing is right there, and you come straight off the wing and you just kind of a curve right there, and you kind of come down and say, well, there's a leg here and it's going to come down. There's little foots down in there somewhere. You don't even have to draw his foot in yet. Here's the other leg, kind of comes in and ends right behind the other leg. Now we've established where everything goes. It's called composition. A good composition is where your object touches or comes close to touching 3 of the 4 sides of your paper. You want to leave a little bit more space in the front here because he's got to have some breathing room. If we were to put his beak all the way to the end of the paper, it's kind of uncomfortable. And so give him a little bit more space in front of him than you do in the back. His little back tail could almost touch that edge if you wanted it to. Now I'm going to start establishing where some of the detail type things go, like his eye, his wing, things like that. Before we get into the detail, we don't want to do detail quite yet. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to come over, if this is the beak, and I kind of look at my drawing and then look at the scrap and kind of compare it. Is it close? You know, there are some things I can change a little bit, but that's okay. But I do want to establish like where that eye goes. Just going to do a little circle. Somewhere up in there is where that eye is going to go. And that wing, if I come straight down from his head, that's about where that tip of the wing is, where that crook of the wing is. So straight down off his head, it's about right in there. Kind of comes out here, folds in there. Now, you'll notice how sketchy this is. I mean, some of those things, they don't look very smooth. They don't look very good. And that's okay, because we need graphite on there anyway if we're going to smear it and smooth it around. But nothing in here is ground into the surface. So now what I want to do is, I'm a little unsure if everything's quite in the right place. And so I'm going to do a little bit of shading. And I'm going to do the shading with the side of my pencil like this as well. And so I'm just going to look at the darkest areas and shade those in. This one kind of comes, there's a very dark kind of shape that goes over his eye. I'm just going to put that in. And again, I'm still way at the back of my pencil, so that's not very dark. We can get that darker later. Right now, we're still struggling with proportions. Trying to make sure everything is in the right place. It looks like it's about the right size. And if you think, well, that's going to confuse me, some of those other sketchy lines, just take your kneaded eraser, pinch it down to a knife blade like that, and then just go in and rub it, touch it, and it'll come right out. Easily done. Also, there's a little gray under his beak there. I'm just going to shade that in a little bit, all the way down his neck. And it's kind of sketchy. You know, there's nothing really smooth here. Even his back is very gray. There's a little bit of light across his wing right there at the top. So if you accidentally get too much graphite in there, just take your kneaded eraser and pull it out a little bit. But you need all that graphite in there. I'm not worried too much about the little light tips of those feathers that kind of come out. I can do those with my kneaded eraser. Remember, all this stuff is still on the surface. There's nothing being ground into the surface yet. I'll leave a little bit of that light area where his leg kind of connects up in there and darken in some of that. And all you got to do to darken it is just add a little pressure, just a little. Don't need much. Now, some of these edges we may want to get rid of. We may not even want to have them in there. Sometimes it's fun to break edges and not even have them in there. So you can, if you wanted to, you can kind of smooth things out. And as you erase, if you miss an edge, if your edge starts to kind of fade and go away, that's okay. So we're just starting out simple shapes, trying to keep everything very simple. No sharp edges, no sharp lines around things. So once you've got it to that point, we can take our cotton swab and we can start blending a little bit. I always start in the darkest areas, kind of blend those out. What that'll do is kind of smooth out that area. But overall, the goal here is to get graphite onto our cotton swab so that eventually we'll be able to draw with it. I'm just kind of smoothing out some of that graphite that's there. Remember, it was superficial, it was on the surface, so I can smooth it around. Look at your reference, and if you think, well, put some pencil where I shouldn't have, that's okay, we can erase it. Or if you think, well, I needed to put some pencil over here and it wasn't in the right place, you can smear it out to the end and really get some good proportioning. So as you draw, you just kind of adjust. Adjust, adjust, adjust. Sure. Nothing here is permanent. That's the cool thing about drawing with the side of your pencil. Everything can be changed. And so as you draw, you can just adjust. You can take that kneaded eraser and lighten things up. In fact, if you think, well, I don't want to get rid of all of it, you just touch it with your kneaded eraser and it'll suck it up. That kneaded eraser absorbs your graphite. It doesn't rub it out, it absorbs it. So all this does, this smearing stuff, it just kind of smooths it out. I can even go down his leg, kind of smooth some of that out. The other thing that does is it makes your edges very soft. If you want some feathers in there, you just, as you smooth it out, you just kind of go in the direction that the feathers are going, and you'll get this kind of streaky but very soft tones. Now I can use my kneaded eraser to just clean up some things, clean up some edges if I need to. Some of that white stuff at the top of his head, you can just kind of leave it out, just get rid of it. Doesn't have to be there. When you're kind of happy with your object, that it's kind of in the right place, that it's the size you want it, then we can kind of switch over and start doing some detail, higher contrast. And in order to do that, we need that other pencil. So that 6B pencil is your dark pencil. And if you're happy with the way this looks, then you can say, okay, I'm ready for the detail. I'm ready to grind it into the surface. I'm ready to make it a little bit darker in certain areas. We're going to avoid drawing a line around things, okay? Up to this point in your life, you've probably always had a dark edge around things. We're going to kind of avoid that. It's not necessary. I start with the eye. So I'm going to switch over to the detail mode. I'm going to be like this. I'm going to go in and do his eye. And his eye is just kind of a round circle. And you've got the outside of his eye. And then you've got this little pupil. And there's probably a little shine in there somewhere too. Not that I can actually see a shine. But instead of doing a full circle, I'm just going to do this little like black moon shape. I want to keep that shine going on in that eye. I can also say, well, there's some darkness. It's kind of a blue, but it's very dark right there. I can add that. And that little bit of contrast just makes things pop. Here's that dark that's over his eye. That kind of an interesting. And I'm just shading it in, just zigzags back and forth. And I'm trying to avoid putting my hand where the graphite is. I'm keeping it clean over here. And as I go, anything that's on the edge, like especially hair and feathers and things like that, you just let it go. You just kind of leave that kind of sketchy. We'll soften that up. We'll get it later. There's a little line that's called a feathered line, and it's where you kind of drop your pencil in, you give it a little bit of pressure, and then you kind of fleck it. And as you fleck it, it kind of comes up, and you get this soft little edge. So that's a feathered line right there. And you do that with hair, feathers, things like that. A little bit of pressure here. Then as I go down, I'm just shading a little bit, looking where it's darkest, and shading the darkest areas first. If there are dark areas, you just press down there. And notice I haven't put a line around his beak yet. Really don't necessarily want to do that. If it's a little darker, just put a little shape of that darkness in there. It doesn't have to be a line, just a little zigzaggy shape. It's like under his neck right there. It's just a little darker. And anywhere else that you think it goes just a little darker. You can even switch over to this. If you like that smooth look there, you can switch over to this. A lot of drawing is learning to see, where are the differences between the dark and the light, and emulating those. Try to get your pencil to do that dark and light, and it's the amount of pressure you put into it. I'm totally convinced that if you want to draw well, it's just practice. A lot of people say, well, you're so talented. It's like, you know how much I practice? I'm like a professional basketball player. I practice every day, hours a day. There's a lot of practice there. Anybody that gets good at anything, whether it's playing piano or a sport, they understand that practice is important. I'm going to just take my cotton swab, and you notice that you've got some graphite on there already. Once you get that really loaded, you can draw with that. And all the background we're going to do with that graphite. So I'm just going to smooth that out a little bit. You don't have to press hard. You can just barely press. And I want a sharp edge around his beak, but I don't want to have to draw a line around it. So when I do his eye, notice that little shine in the eye. All I've done is I've taken my cotton swab and just blended the very bottom and the very top, and I tried to leave a spot of light. If you miss it, you put in more graphite than you need to. Just take your kneaded eraser, pinch it down to a little point, just come down and touch that little spot. Clean it up a little bit. And you'll have that little light come back into his eye. That makes it look alive. That gives it some really good contrast. The rest of his beak, even though you want it sharp, you don't want to have to draw a line around it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my kneaded eraser. Now I'm just going to clean up the edges. Have it go to a point and let the edges take care of themselves. You don't need to draw a line around it. We're just going to clean that up, clean up the edges around his, where I've smeared it. And that's it. Everybody sees the edge. You know it's there. You don't have to draw a line around it. Same thing with his little head up there at the top, where that white stuff is. If I don't want to draw it, because if you draw it in, then it looks a little little harsh, a little hard. So you can use your cotton swab and just put in just a couple little dots or dashes like this, and everybody understands that that's the top of his head without having to draw a line around there. And it keeps it soft, and it keeps it, you know, fuzzy, because feathers are very soft. And you can clean that up. In fact, if you wanted to, and you think, oh, well, I want it to look a little more hairy, you can take your kneaded eraser and just put in some little lines, just touch it up a little bit, and it still looks soft, but there's no edge there. In fact, some of this edge is lost. You can't even see it. Nothing wrong with that. Leave it lost. Just that kneaded eraser is going to clean up everything, and that's his head. I'm going to take my dark pencil, and there's just a few little dark edges right here. There's some dark fur that's not fur, feathers. Birds don't have fur. Fluff, we'll call it fluff. Just a little bit in there, and it doesn't have to be in exactly the right place either. You put it where you feel like it needs to be. If it's light, just leave it out. You can always blend it. You can always add more later. But I'm giving this some pressure. Trying to make that as dark as I can. So any place that's dark. Again, if it's a little light, there's a little light edge that goes around his wing right there at the bottom. You can barely see it. Just leave it out because we can blend it. We can always add more later. Just add some darkness. And in between. And I'm just doing these little marks. These are the in-between darknesses that I see. And again, they're not exactly there. It's okay. And again, in his body, there are some little dark streaks, but there's light in between. So I'm just going to do these little streaks. Little spots of darkness here and there, you just throw those in. And as we blend with our cotton swab, we can blend some of those things together. There's one leg on the one side is a little dark, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw in some of that darkness there. I'm not necessarily needing a line around the leg. I just need the shape of darkness. His other leg is not quite that dark. And his feet, I have no idea what's going on with his feet. I'm just going to look at the darkness and throw some of that in there. Now, a lot of this we're going to do with our cotton swab. As we get graphite on that cotton swab, you can blend with it. Some of the background we're going to do with it. So wherever it's really light on the edges, just let it go. When we do the background, we'll remember to kind of do that a little bit with the cotton swab. So just for an example, so you can understand what it is that I'm trying to tell you about the cotton swab thing here. Let me do some grass in the back. Let me load this with some graphite here. And like say right here where his neck is, there's a blade of grass that comes out here. And maybe there's like a little cattail back in there. You can do that with your cotton swab. Don't have quite enough graphite on there, but it's very soft. Okay, that's not difficult to do there. And you can make grass back in there. You can do all sorts of things. And if you don't like it, it's pretty much on the surface. You can just erase it. Don't have to worry about lines. Some of these little feathers that come out away from him, you can do those with your cotton swab. Just take your cotton swab and kind of bring them out. They're very light, so you can take your kneaded eraser back into it and pull out some of those little light areas with your kneaded eraser. And get that very soft, subtle kinds of things. Clean up anything that needs to be. Now your kneaded eraser, you're going to have to pinch it often because it absorbs the graphite, but it always needs a little bit of clean space to absorb. You don't want to saturate it. So you can pinch it often, get it to a little blade, do a couple of lines with it, and then pinch it again. Even down its back, that edge, it's down his back, you can lose some of that. Just let it go. Let it go. You kind of pick and choose where you smear it. And then take your kneaded eraser and go back into it and pull out any of the light areas. I'll use that around my edges to smooth things out. Any of those little light areas, smooth it out. Try just touching your kneaded eraser on something. If it's really light, just touch it. Sounds like it's kissing your paper. Just give it a little kiss with your kneaded eraser. It'll pull it right out. Creates that kind of nice texture that's in there. Because you may smear it and put a little bit more graphite in there than you really want. You can always come back into it and add more too. So if it's really dark, go back over it with your graphite, with your 6B pencil, that really dark pencil. Add a little more to it. Try that feathered line where you kind of flip it. Give it a little flick. The key here is we didn't really draw a line around it at all. It just kind of takes care of itself. You can even use your cotton swab to get the little branch that he's standing on, that little piece of wood. And you just keep working it until you're happy with it. And because your hand is up off the surface, you're not getting that dark on here. You're using your cotton swab to smear things. The last thing you want to do is you want to sign this. And you can take this as far as you want to go. Here's some more background. You can use that cotton swab, get all that grass and stuff that's back in there. And it's soft and fuzzy. If you look at our grass back there, because of the focal point of the camera, it's going to be soft and fuzzy. It's not going to be really detailed. And so your grass can be that way. Just shapes of dark and light. Of course, the last thing you do is just sign it. Good place for a signature is about right in here. Don't put it on the edge. If you do a really nice piece of artwork and you want to frame it, you'll lose your signature in the frame. I hope you had a lovely time drawing, because I think art makes life better.